Hello and welcome to the show. Today we have the show called Entrepreneur You Should Know, and our guest is Rachid Zahidi. He is an amazing person, part of the EO Tampa Bay group. He's almost like the godfather of the organization. He's been around in the organization for a while. His experience and backgrounds in business safety has actually allowed him to write a book called The Business Immunity System. We're going to hear a little bit about Rachid's journey through entrepreneurship, more about what we should talk about now in today's society of how we can protect our business and hopefully have a little fun along the way. So let's start with our intro video and launch the show.
I'm Naeem Hamdar.
I'm Cheryl Biram.
My name is Brandon Asaf.
I'm LJ Schaff.
I'm Eric Fairwell.
Matthew Klinsky.
Chris Comitto.
My name is Don Tangway.
I'm Laura Webb.
Rachid Zahidi.
Michael DeAugustine.
I'm Matt Brooks. I'm Nitesh Sapra.
And I'm a member of the Entrepreneur Organization here in Tampa Bay.
I've been a member of the Entrepreneur Organization for about 8 years.
Since 2013.
I help make payments simple, secure, and reliable.
We help people who are adventurous live their best life.
We help staffing firms with their back office operations.
We help employers avoid hiring mistakes.
Help our clients cook less and live more.
I coach leadership teams.
Plumbing for multiple housing and hotels.
RFID technology. My company develops and invests commercial real estate across the Southeast.
The learning is tremendous.
EO has helped me personally and professionally accomplish all my goals.
EO has helped my business thrive by thinking bigger.
EO has helped me discover my passion for business growth coaching.
EO is not just Tampa Bay. It opens up these global connections.
There are over 14,000 members.
196 chapters.
62 countries.
These chapters are offering
Opportunities for business and personal growth.
Education and collaboration.
Go to eotampabay.com. eotampabay.com.
EOTampaBay.com.
Be considered for membership.
what a heck of a way to start the show. I love that video.
Yeah.
It's just an awesome video. Without further ado, let me just give you a little bit of background on where Rachid has worked before I bring him onto the screen. He is the president and CEO of Sentinel Background Checks and the Sentinel Data Retrieval. He has his industries have included items like risk management, background checks, and anti-money laundering investigations. And I mentioned he's the author of the book. So without further ado, welcome, Rachid. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Matt, and thanks for doing this. And I love your studio. I know I've said it before, but every time I look at it, I'm just in love with it. I'm going to have to get your help in duplicating it.
Hey, I'm willing to rent out my space if you want to use it anytime you want.
Yeah, maybe we could host a few of these.
So I mentioned that you've been in EO for a long time, but I think more importantly, you have the respect of a lot of our members, just in terms of not only how you've run your business and how you've been integral to the community, but really we just look for you to advice, not only on the board level, but just as a friend. And so thank you for showing up and being part of the show.
And thank you. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for everything you do. And thanks for the kind words and intro. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So if you don't mind, if you can give all of our listeners just a little bit of background on you and who you think you are, and then we'll dive into a little bit more about your unique history in terms of risk management and stratification.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Well, it depends on the day. Sometimes I think I'm an entrepreneur. Sometimes I think I'm a good father. Sometimes I think I'm a frustrated musician and guitarist. So it depends on the day. Anyways, CEO of Sentinel Background Checks and also Sentinel Data Retrieval. And we initially started with doing other background check products for other background check companies, or we call in our industry the wholesale, and that's the Sentinel Data Retrieval side of things. And then once we made some lists like the Fast 50, people would ask us, hey, you do background checks? And then we'd find ourselves saying, well, actually, we only work with background check companies. But then eventually we just said, what are we doing here? Why not just create that strategic business unit that eventually turned into a business of its own, which is Sentinel Background Checks. As you know, people are always concerned with being able to hire faster, and then to hire safer, and of course, and then to hire right. as we know, not just anybody is a great asset to your company. Only the right people are a great asset to your company, because the wrong people end up being a liability, for your business, as you know very well, being in the industry you're in.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, as a person, I'm a father to two preteens. I love, I love music.
That's
I
a
love
full-time job, by the way.
What's that?
That's a full-time job, being a parent of two
Yeah, I mean,
preteens.
it's and again, congratulations again on becoming a. How long has it been?
Hannah is 2.5, and Nathan is 6 months.
Yeah, man, time flies.
My days fly because I don't get much sleep because one's getting up and then the other gets up at, so in the middle of the night, there's like 5 interruptions of a 6-hour sleep.
Oh man, you have to tell me the secret though, because when I look at you doing all these things you're doing, including taking this on and being on the board and running your businesses and going into the operating room, and then it doesn't show. So maybe there's a secret you want to share with us.
That's the secret right there. It's maximizing my life satisfaction. I fulfilled, and it's all about balancing what fills you up so you can give as much as you can. And so that's the secret. You want to read it? Just go ahead.
Yes, I agree. And I'm going to have you on the SBC podcast so we can talk about it on another time. So
what you said was very interesting. So you actually were in the data retrieval space. You were almost a B2B business that transitioned to an end user customer, not necessarily a consumer, but the consumer being
different.
So how did that transition? What was the percentage of revenue change? Was it a slow transition, or was it a January 1st, I'm going to pop up and transition? Because I read a book from, Choosing Greatness and Good to Great. And it really talks about keeping your core values, as steady as possible. And so tell me about your transition, and when did that occur, over how much time?
Yeah. Great question. I mean, the transition was not overnight. I'm kind of lucky in the two businesses are related, and then so there was ability to transition and to share some services between the two of them.
Yeah.
And even to just run certain things through one, and then do the allocations on the accounting side, and also having worked in that side of the industry, there was a base to build on, and I was able to borrow even some personnel for the other one. Eventually, they had to be separate ones. But also the other fortunate thing for me is that relationships which are key, and I think I make that as one of the most important points in this book here that I was lucky enough to be involved with. And there's a couple of other EOers too in this book that you may know. And I talked about the importance of the relationships, and transitioning relationships were key. And I had like a client for the wholesale side that eventually she sold her company. And when she sold her company, which was on the retail side, or the CRA, the Consumer Reporting Agency, the people who had acquired her company were not interested in the personnel. So I was able to kind of take 3 or 4 people all at once who had experience on the retail side, and then just like, kind of almost like a ready-made kind of team. Of course, we still had a lot of work to do, and things like that. So then, like I mentioned, we started at a strategic business unit first, like operating under the umbrella of Sentinel Screening, which was the original name. Then we rebranded each one to avoid the confusion, so people know which is which. Then eventually, after a couple of years, completely separated them. The only common thing between the two of them is the one word Sentinel, obviously for recognition, and then also, of course, myself, owning both of them. But they're completely separate, and of course, dealing with end users is a whole other story, because wholesale, it's hard to diversify with wholesale. No matter how hard you try, you always end up with maybe 3 or 4 clients being the majority of your or the bulk of your revenue. And then also the margins are slimmer. You get higher volume, but the margins are smaller, because people give you volume, and then they expect like those types of margins. And you can also be squeezed for terms. On the wholesale side, it's not uncommon for people to expect 60-day terms, 90-day terms.
Wow, for background checks?
Right.
Jeez.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you have a choice. You can give them those terms, or you can say no, and then a competitor gives them those terms. So there was always those things. On the retail side, you get, of course, you get a little bit of an opportunity to have a little bit higher margins, but for the same amount of revenue that you may get from 5 clients on the wholesale side, you'll need anywhere from 20 to more in order to kind of match that same level of revenue. The other thing, of course, is diversification is always a good idea. So between the two businesses, having diversification is a great thing. But within the retail side, there is a big line of products, whereas like the bulk of the wholesale side is the county criminal searches. When you go into the retail side or the CRA side, you have identity verification products, which we always recommend that you start with, like social trace, to find out what the person, where they have lived, what kind of aliases they have used. Then you go from there. You kind of obviously want to do the criminal research. You want to do the sweeps like that from state to county to federal, and depending on what you're hiring for. Then there's all these other verifications like credentials verifications, the history verifications, like obviously like double checking the data points and the facts that are being listed on the resumes, applying on the resumes or exaggerating truths and things like that. Is a common thing for many years. And then from there, you got all these other additional products like DMV records. Like if you're hiring.
So how many products do you have?
Well, I mean, it's the main ones are like those that center around identification, and then the criminal parts. Within each, there's like subcategories. Credential.
I've seen those. I've seen those menus. But I mean, you probably, what do you think, about 100 different screening or more?
Yeah, I mean, I think for to do a good job, you don't need the 100 products. But really, like under the umbrella of the identity checks, the main one you want to start with is obviously you want to check the IDs of the people, and you want to because if you're checking under the wrong identity, then it's a moot point. You might as well just forget it, right? So the starting point is very important. So the identity checks is one umbrella. The verifications, which is like histories and degrees, if that matters to you. We've heard of those big stories where even at Coca-Cola or many other companies, at high level executive levels, where there was been people found with fake degrees that said they had masters they never had. And scandal, right? And a big component obviously is the criminal, which is that can be county criminal, that can be statewide, that can be federal, that can be this database kind of sweep, which you then verify. Then there is, of course, the DMV motor vehicle records. There's the drug screening. And there is also the eligibility verification, e-verified, like to make sure that people have the legal right. That, of course, you can do as an employer for yourself. Some of these you can do like the verifications, yourself. And drug testing, of course, we can't skip that drug testing for people operate.
So let's take a step back. How did you get into background checks anyway, and security checks? I mean, what a fascinating model. And I could definitely tell that you like it, and you're diversified in the fact that you're wholesale and retail. But let's start at the beginning, like in terms of what was your journey like to start into the wholesale spot, and why did you choose Sentinel as the name?
Yeah, well, I mean, first, the last corporate job I had was working at Citigroup, being running a team of anti-money laundering investigations analysts.
How big was your team?
I had 12 analysts under, operating under me. We were monitoring transactions like that were going back and forth. We're looking for all kinds of suspicious activities, money being used for illicit, kind of either drug or terrorist type purposes and things like that. So anyways, so I was approached about investing in a startup at the time. And then entrepreneurship was always something that I was attracted to as a kid. I was selling candy. I used to raise bunnies and sell them.
Bunnies?
Yeah, bunnies. And the good news is they multiply fast.
So your mom was okay with having you just have like a dozen bunnies around at all times?
Well, yeah, I mean, you have to know. I mean, it's like we won't go too much into that, but I grew up in a different environment. I grew up in a rural area. We had plenty of space, and we were working on the fields, and we were I grew up with no running water or electricity. I didn't see any of those things. We had a well. That's kind of a thing. We had plenty of land. That's the good news is there was plenty of room. So
Okay.
it was a bit of an agrarian, rural kind of type of setting. So there was having animals, having always a cow around, and having some sheep, and having a donkey, and having
That's cool.
some chickens around, and whatever was normal.
So you're selling the bunnies for cash to your neighbors or whoever wants to buy them.
Yeah,
so you knew it at an early age.
Yeah.
You knew at an early age you were destined to run a business.
So entrepreneurship was always something that I was kind of attracted to, and then having come out of that risk management and AML or anti-money laundering investigations and such, when I was approached about starting up, being involved in a background check related industry, and I did some research at the time. I looked at things like the publication at the time, Entrepreneur. I think it was Entrepreneur Magazine. I think once a year they say, okay, this is the best businesses to get into. And incidentally, this was also on that list. So everything kind of aligned. So I invested, and I initially was just going to be a silent investor. But slowly and surely I got more and more involved until I ended up acquiring all the interests in there. That combined with the fact I've always had a strong desire to do something that really adds value, where I can actually see the results of my efforts, and I see the impact that it has on the people directly that I'm helping and that I'm serving.
Yeah.
And then that combined again with like a strong desire to decide my own schedule, my own destiny, my own ability to go visit family overseas when I needed to, and then to be able to, which initially I was able to kind of stay at home with my son at the time, even though I had nannies and babysitters. Sometimes they didn't show. So it was much easier for me to kind of do that with my own business than if I had to say to someone, hey, I can't come in, or it's just not the same.
So this is about maybe 10 years ago. Was this in 2010?
This was like I think around 06, 07, like the initial, like the beginnings of
the last recession.
Yeah. And then we did some research at the time, and to answer the other question about like how we came up with Sentinel. There was a homework at the time when we were first starting it out, and then me and my partners, we had a lot of fun with it actually. And I remember that night being so much fun. Whereas we even took out the dictionary and we started looking at all these different words that had to do with with guarding your business, with warning, safety. And then somehow it all led us to the one of the synonyms for like a guard, because you need to stand guard at the gate of your business, just like you need to stand guard at the gate of your mind to make sure you get the right inputs into your brain and into your head. Same thing with your business. Who are you letting in? Who are you giving the keys to? And there are many horror stories. I mean, I've been in the industry. I've seen so many people that unfortunately didn't come to us until 75 grand was embezzled, or 100 grand was embezzled, or someone got arrested in front of their client's house. All of these things happen. I mean, there's people because if someone's starting up a business and 75 or 150 grand is embezzled, in a lot of instances for a small business,
it's game over.
That's like that can take them out, because that's probably the majority of their revenue or their livelihood. So unlike big companies that have like big reserves for those types of situations. So hopefully I answered your question there, because I'm going into all kinds of directions.
I love it. No, this is all, I didn't know that. I didn't know why, when you started it and stuff. So that's really fascinating. And how was the interaction when you were buying out your partners? Was there any like funny transactions? Was there fighting? Was it mutually beneficial? And you said, hey, this is the right thing to do. And they said, sure, buy me out.
Yeah, well, I think we're all getting to a point where we realized I was the most involved, and I was putting more into the business, and then they all had different things that they were thinking about doing, and we're still very good friends. I mean, to this day, and so I think we just saw that it was like the best for someone to take it. To take it and own it, and then put more into it because that was required. And then just also for that consistency and vision, so we're not pulling in different directions. And then we made it kind of almost kind of equal to say, okay, you can either take it. This is the value right now. This is before a lot of traction. This is before the business taking off. And this is okay. This is the value we're going to put on this. And then it's either you can take it, I can take it, two of us can take it, or whatever. So in the end, the agreement was, because at the time I was the most involved and the most like in contact with clients and vendors, and it made the most sense at the time. So I just kind of took it, which I was ready to kind of, because I had already like started an international business at the time that has to do with import and export. Then I had to push that to the side.
So once you went down the entrepreneur route, you were like, okay, let's do this. Let's do another one. Let's do.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to like sometimes. Self-awareness is key. I mean, let me take this opportunity to share that lesson, because self-awareness is key. And I'm still always like doing exercises like regularly, like quarterly, reviewing that, like really, what am I going to focus on and why, and trying to remember my why. Why am I doing what I'm doing? Just so I can keep that perspective and not. And also, like anytime, as you know, you're saying yes to something, you're obviously saying no to another or to many other things. So if there's a struggle, it's sometimes like, for me, it's just being able to say no, because I am an idea person. I come up with ideas, a lot. And then one of my challenges is to make sure I remind myself, hey, you have to say no to that. Yeah. It's been going on, already. And some people even go to that other extreme where they say, you can only ride one horse at a time.
I know.
Or if you take two rabbits, you end up catching none. So it depends on where you are. But we've also seen people who have done like serial entrepreneurship successfully. And I think it boils down, if you can get them to be autonomous up to a certain point, and there's like accountability checkpoints in there, and there is maybe a couple of key people that you can lean on a little bit, not fully rely on. You can never have a single point, failure, because I've learned that lesson too. Because if you rely on one or two people, I mean, even it can't be even just me either. Because if that person is hit by a bus or
get hit by a bus, it's like
it's or if that person, like if it's one of your employees, if they leave, then where are you? So it's always key to rely on this process and procedures, and also to establish like accountability habits. And accountability metrics and accountability check-ins, and also as an entrepreneur to not forget to check in when things are going well. Things are going well, and then we can easily start, flying away, like what the Jim Collins that you mentioned. I think it was in Good to Great that it calls. There's the hedgehog and there is the fox. And sometimes, some of us like to be foxes. You're just out there doing events, running around and things like that. But we have to check in to see really how our business is doing.
I think, running businesses nowadays, it's there's pluses and minuses in the fact that there's so much information that we have right now. I mean, not only can we work completely remotely, but I read so much, and like the advice that all these experienced entrepreneurs are talking about, I can start incorporating it. So it's almost, it's even from the 15 years ago is when I started, getting involved. So around the same time as you, we didn't have I didn't have the resources that I have now to be successful. And so I can only imagine, what it was like 20 years ago running businesses, to the point where, you could just check out and really not understand what's going on with the business.
Right.
For me, I'm one of those serial entrepreneurs that does get distracted sometimes, but I almost have to, I consciously make an effort to try to refocus myself on and having those backups and checkpoints in place. So traction has been something that I really love, but not only just traction as a philosophy, but all of these Simon Sinek's, the why, and you put into effect all of these other authors and leaders. It's fun to run businesses, and I think we could do a pretty good job. It sounds like me and you are very similar in that case, in terms of we always are brainstorming. We're visionaries from that standpoint.
Right. Yeah. And obviously, we're both like very involved with EO here. And I think we're probably up there, if they're not the top two, with attendance and with kind of commitment to events. So I can always,
even if it's only the two of us at the event, we will be at the event.
That's right. So yeah, definitely kudos. And as I said, like I really admire you for doing all of these things that you do, being a good family man, being a good surgeon, being a good doctor, then having a staffing company, and then having all these things, all these plates are spinning.
Yeah.
And
A
it's
lot
not
of people think that's a bad thing, though. I get a lot of negative remarks from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Self-awareness is key again, because I mean, for some of us, we need that. We need to be kept on our toes. We need to be challenged. Lest we start getting, getting bored.
Yeah.
So by going back to the tools and everything, I think one of the things too is that like there is another side to that with so much information. I one of my favorite quotes or ideas to remember is, I think wealth of information can create poverty of attention, because we can be overwhelmed with so much information to the point that we are paralyzed.
Yeah.
Into either indecision or inaction or just pure overwhelm, because there's just so much information.
So how do you balance it then? What's your secret?
Well, I think one of the main things is daily reminders, because I mean, it's like consistency is one of the most difficult things for us as human beings, and that's what makes the difference between people who can continue to succeed and those who have just they're one hit wonder, or they do one thing one time but they stop doing what made them successful initially. And I almost became victim to that myself a few times.
Yeah.
When it was like things were going great, and then I kind of almost forgot what I did to get there, and I stopped doing some of those things, maybe lost some of the hunger, maybe kind of dropped some of those routines that are key. So if you look around my thing now, you can't see it in the camera, but around me are like these reminders to like one, to remember to take care of myself, shareholder number one, and employee number, I hate to say it, but it's like a lot of times we put ourselves last. But who worries more about the business? Who puts in more? So we have to make sure that we take care of ourselves. So I remind myself, like anything as simple as breathing, just remembering to breathe and to take that time to gain perspective, and also just taking that time initially early in the day, just like not jumping in the wash machine and being tossed around, but actually taking that time and consciously saying, okay, if I did only one single thing today, what is the most impactful thing that I could do? If I could do one. And then, like, just as an example, those are some of the exercises I do. And I remind myself also not to get stuck in that loop, like if there was ever mistakes, so just to embrace the grind, because yes, it's a roller coaster. Entrepreneurship is a roller coaster, because I mean, a lot of people talk about the upside and they talk about the glory and the success. But as many people have said before, it's an overnight success that's been in 10 years in the making or something like that, right? So for a lot of these things, people don't talk about that grind that goes on in the background. They don't talk about all the homework, all the commitments, and all the consistent things that you have to do day in and day out. So I remind myself of that to keep moving forward. And also, if there's something bad happens, only look for the past for a couple of reasons. It's either to celebrate successes or to take any lessons from it if there is mistakes, but nothing else. Never dwell on the past. It's easier said than done, but it's something that I know from myself. The more I reminded myself of it, the more it became easier for me to do. It became a habit for me to where I say, okay, stop doing that, And then also to engage our imagination, because for anything huge to happen, first you have to imagine it. Someone has to imagine it. You look at everything. Disney, he imagined it first, and then kind of it happened. Like Apple, Steve Jobs imagined it. Was it easy? No. If you've watched the movie about Disney, you know how much rejection he went through. You go Steve Jobs' story. How many reinventions he personally had to go through, and then as a business, being fired from his own business and all of that. But that's all part of the story. So it's like the pendulum, the pendulum swings, So sometimes for it to swing in the positive direction, it has to swing in the other direction a little bit. Or another analogy I'd like to use for those, hard times is like the ball. The harder it hits the ground, sometimes the higher it bounces.
Yeah.
So just like, so those are some things I try to remind myself of.
That's
And
a lot of things, Rachid. I'm not gonna lie. You have a lot of reminders on your list.
But trust me, it's like they're actually like, they look like a lot, but you can do this and remind yourself of this.
Yeah.
Like,
Do you have a routine that you go through, like the morning miracle or anything like that, where you kind of have your alone time in the morning to focus?
yeah, I mean, I have to admit it's not always perfect, but I did always strive to have that routine, to get up and allow a little bit of that room.
Yeah.
Before I open email, before I get engaged into electronics, before all the chains, start yanking at you.
Yeah.
I try to remind myself that email and phones, they are there for my convenience.
Yeah.
Because
it's hard to do, especially because, you want the business to succeed. You want to create a legacy for your family. You want financial freedom. And so you have all these other like core needs and wants. And you know that if you can get one more deal in, or if you can respond a little bit faster, you might get closer to those deeper goals, but at what price? And I think as entrepreneurs, the good entrepreneurs understand the price and they understand the value of what they have to give up to get there. And they may choose to do that, but they understand it. I think the entrepreneurs that are that come and go, that are like not fake entrepreneurs, but people who don't really know what they're getting themselves into. They don't understand that price. It's a very real price to succeed. You just have to, and you still have to make that choice on a daily basis, whether it's giving up time with your kids or whether it's staying late at the office or maybe even giving deal. There's so many minute things that add up very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's key what you said there about like because a lot of times people don't do the homework and they don't realize. And then when you're not prepared for that grind, when you think it's all just going to be, easy and glory and whatnot, then you get that shock when things go wrong, or when you find out how hard you have to work and how consistent you have to be at it. And that's where a lot of people get that shock, and then they kind of either quit or they kind of they get lost. And I give up a few things, like going back to the routine. I give up like watching a lot of TV. I cut the cord many years ago. Yeah. And the only thing I watch is anything constructive, where it's like if I'm trying to like work on a specific skill, and then I'm reading books in regards to that skill, or I'm watching a TEDx, talk about it, or a conversation with one of these people that maybe I think is where I want to be when it comes to that, or that I want to learn from. But sometimes, yes, I may be out of the loop on the latest sitcom or the latest.
Right. Yeah, I don't pay attention to that.
Binge watching and talking about. But nevertheless, even the news, I don't start with the news, because again, it's like you have to start, you have to stand guard at the gate there. It does affect us. It does affect our emotions. It does affect the color with which we see the world. Is it a positive one, or is it a one full of fear and fear mongering and such? So I try to focus on what I can control. And of course, that doesn't mean be oblivious to the rest of the world. But I know this for a fact. Anytime that there is something important, something I need to know about, I always know about it, because someone will bring it up in a conversation. Someone will share it in social media. Someone will bring it to my attention. It always does. So I don't have to be, the
important things.
All these notifications from my phone, and the news at all times.
What are your thoughts on this influence culture? The influence culture that are getting $100,000 a year for Instagramming and YouTube. What are your thoughts in terms of, because they consider themselves entrepreneur, maybe they're starting a e-commerce business and things like that, but from my entrepreneur experience, those just can't last. They're not going to last. And so the question is, what are they going to, I feel bad. Have you seen this before in your experience in terms of,
are you feeling bad for them, or are you feeling bad for the people who are
for them? No, for them, because I think they're down a path at 22 years old, making $100,000 posting on Instagram. It's not something that's sustainable. And there's so many of them that eventually they're going to get down. Now, I know there's a lot of philosophies that, ABC, NBC, those channels are going to go away as a medium for communication. YouTube, Facebook, those are going to be the big mediums. But even so, I mean, there's thousands of these influencers that are just paid marketing people.
Yeah.
They don't realize that they actually are employees. They just have multiple bosses.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, obviously, like, I think some of them will maybe sober up and then will reinvent themselves or continue to reinvent themselves and build that as something to build on and to learn from and to go on. And it's just like, it's what came to my mind, right, was the .com, bubble.
Yeah.
It created a lot of people that were like prematurely, had these windfalls. And many of them, like now, are gone. Their history, they're not doing so well. But there's some of them that were able to like kind of learn from that, even emerge like stronger and emerge better, and then they were able to cope and reinvent themselves. But I think that things like that will happen, like with many things. There's unfortunately a lot of it is based on the hype. It's based on the eyeballs. It's where the eyeballs are. The money is going, right now. And the algorithms, and as AI, artificial intelligence takes over that, and then it just takes on a life of its own. And then at times it becomes like the tail wagging the dog, because now it's like we're lost in that matrix, to where it's hard. It's not easy. It's hard because, I mean, one of my biggest concerns is that, like, what can we do to protect our kids from the bad influence and from being sucked into these things that we know are not going to be positive or good for their own self-esteem, or for building the right core values, the right principles, and teaching them resilience, teaching them like what it really takes to be successful, what it takes to be.
That changes, I think, from generation to generation. I'm sure my parents had no idea that I was going to do what I was going to do. Right. So I think from a generation, and those gaps are getting a little bit bigger. Because we're not having kids until we're 30 now and 40. And, I think that the generational gap is actually interesting to me, because before it used to be, 15, 20 years. Now it's 35, 40 years difference. And it's a bigger gap, which I think is very fascinating if you wanted to learn it. You brought up artificial intelligence. Do you think what is artificial intelligence role in terms of business security, in terms of backgrounds, in terms of your industry? Is there any movement in your industry that you have seen?
Yeah, I think all industries are being touched by this, and some of it, like there've been seeds of that from a long time ago, because there's been like if you take an ATS system, applicant tracking systems from a while back, they've been kind of implementing different ways to screen resumes and screen out like resumes that have certain things and whatnot. And then, like, just as an example, but there's been like that thing has been evolving, and I've seen a few different models too that try to take on that whole process and then incorporate like psychological assessments, skills assessments, work histories, and then how people respond to certain things.
I know. I created one and I sold it. I said I created one of those and I sold it.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, it's like, I think it's already there, but we're also seeing it in the way like how we look for records, and because at times, like to search for records against different lists, it's much easier to have an automated system or AI like scour and look, rather than having many individuals trying to kind of trying to punch that in.
Yeah.
But I think off the top of my head, one of the things where it's probably going to be more either like maybe transformational or maybe scary at the same time is when it starts predicting, when it's more like it starts doing this predictable outcomes or predictive models, like the chances of success of an employee. And because most of the stuff we do now is looking into people's past.
Well, you're trying to predict their future based on
we're trying to use their past to kind of predict their future,
or at least give an employer the data to make their own decision for, I guess.
Right. So that's why you're leveraging all these data points, and then you're trying to make that decision. Nevertheless, with the human, it's hard to kind of identify those patterns, especially when you're talking about a huge amounts of data and different types of profiles.
Yeah.
But with AI, it's going to be able to like identify certain things quicker, and it's going to obviously apply different algorithms. Is it always going to be right? no, it's going to be needing to be tweaked and such. But I think it's going to be used in a lot of that to start predicting, like the future.
It's interesting that you said that. I know you try to take as many points as you can. Let's say you get 50 points, which 50 points in terms of data points to try to predict. Yeah. But in a time like a recession, that changes everything. And so you need a vast more, many more points to make a better prediction in terms of it. All right, during a recession, if you have to give a person an 80% or 20% pay cut, what are the chances they're going to steal at that time? Because that's really when you want to know, are they going to pocket 100,000 when you have to cut their salary, or when business isn't going well, or if there's a pandemic? And so the more points we get, maybe, it's crazy to think about this, but I think we're headed here. And this is where I worry about, is based on the average account balance in your checking account, what are you more likely to steal from a business? Or based on your credit card usage increasing over the past 3 months, what are the chances that you're going to steal? That data is out there already. They're already making and using it to say, do you qualify for credit card offers? Do you qualify? You need a personal loan. How do you know I need a personal loan? Well, because you've been increasing your credit card spend.
Definitely, it's been used. I mean, financial industry has been, heavily.
So I can only imagine a software that can take in not only everything you do, but what books are you reading? Are you looking up history on how to fraud, companies? Because it's all there.
The ads, how they're being served to us, and the cookies and the computer and all of that, and retargeting. That's a lot of it is using that. A lot of it is using like the habits, and it's like building on that and to predict what we're going to do, what we will click on.
And for instance, if I was going to hire, let's say 5 new sales reps, I would, looking at their work history may or may not get me what I'm looking for, but I want to know what they're searching. Are they predictable? Are they going to be improving themselves in the future? Are they going to be constantly looking at new ways to do sales? And so if there was a program out there to give me a prediction of based on their habits, how good they'll learn, that is something that's really fascinating.
Mindset, which is key. Like, obviously, when you're hiring, you want people who have a growth mindset, who are open to feedback, and who are gonna continue to do self-development and get better. And I mean, it's like one of the best examples is like I heard someone give is that, like, would you want a doctor who has never taken any continuing education since they graduated to kind of work on you, or do you want one who's staying on top of the latest with best practices and maths and that and side effects and what have you?
Very true.
That's so. But also another place where it's being used is actually to mitigate risk and to predict fraud, like you mentioned. There's a set of predictors that have been proven to, like, not to be automatic all the time, but they just, like, most likely, if anybody has had like a few of those things happen to them, they become more likely or tempted to kind of, because desperation, of leads people to certain types of situations. So again, there's dangers. You can see there's dangers in there. There's opportunities, but there's also dangers.
Well, what should businesses nowadays be worried about? I mean, do you have a couple of guidelines that you can share based on your experience that we should be looking out for today? I mean, what are the top few things as we're kind of going into fourth quarter 2020? What should we be on the lookout for currently?
Well, I mean, it is coming from my perspective as a background check kind of company owner, and then also an entrepreneur is always concerned and with the people you get into your business, and realizing that having been in many round tables, and this is always the issue that keeps coming up, is obviously like the business becomes like the people it hires. So you have to make sure that you're always watching that you're getting the right people in there, because that's going to make the most difference. And then also, like, I think at this time, especially when we're talking a lot about about fear and risk and things like that, it's good to balance that, being aware of all the risks, but also not forgetting the opportunities. And especially for those people that maybe they had a door closed because maybe their business took a big hit or something, just not to stare too long at that closed door and forget the open ones. So I think balance is key to make sure that and then I think what gets measured gets done. It's good to kind of keep an eye on the key metrics, to know our key metrics and to keep an eye on them consistently. And lastly, I think communication is key. We all need that. We need to give that. We need to receive that. And I mean, I used to make that mistake of not liking to repeat myself. I used to wear that as a badge of, pride, to say, hey, I don't like to repeat myself. But actually, the reality of things is, if we don't repeat the things that are important, or the things that we are wanting to drive, or what are really our main goals for that quarter, what we're trying to achieve, people won't take it seriously. So we need that. We need to continue to repeat those messages and to communicate them regularly for ourselves and also for our team members, because otherwise, that's human nature. That's how people differentiate the flavors of the month for the things that are really serious, that were your main business.
Yep. Yeah. Very good. Thank you very much. Well, we're coming to the end of our time. Would you like to share anything else with the listeners at this time? What's the best way they can find you online?
Yeah, absolutely. sbchecks.com and Rachid Podcaster for Instagram. And obviously just search, Google my name, and LinkedIn will come up. Listed on Facebook too as Rachid Zahidi. But sbchecks.com for the, and also if you're an applicant who wants to check out their background just to make sure there are no mistakes, or just in the same way that you would check your credit report before applying for a mortgage, we've created an application for applicants to do that with their background checks, and it's called clearcandidate.com. And you can even link to it from SB Checks. If you go for individuals under that tab, you can get there. And lastly, if you're an entrepreneur who may qualify or wants to be considered for joining us at EO Tampa Bay, where we do a lot of great learning events, and you'd be surrounded with great minds like Matt here, and many entrepreneurs. If you would like to be considered for membership, go to eotampabay.com, or if you would like us to invite you to one of our upcoming events, so you can join us for that, you can also contact us through there, or you can reach out to any of us, Matt or myself or Rhonda, which on our Facebook page, you can reach us that way as well.
Absolutely. Very good. Well, thank you, Rachid, for your time. I'm going to let you go and close out the show. And again, thank you for all your knowledge that you bestowed upon us. And thank you for being the godfather of EO Tampa Bay. We respect you and love you.
Thank you, Matt. Love you too. And I look forward to having you on the SBC podcast so we can dive into your book.
All right. Sounds good.
All right.
All right. Very good. Well, that was a great show. Getting to know Rachid's history allows me to understand what the business decisions he's making currently. His fact that I didn't realize he was in Citibank with the fraud department, and that's very impressive, looking for those frauds. So his mind, I'm sure, is built on looking for those things that maybe I would miss altogether. And his story about creating Sentinel was fascinating, about how he was an investor that moved into an operational role, but still keeps that visionary role. And of course, his leadership within our organization is definitely something that has allowed us to not only stay strong, but continue to grow. And he's our learning chair. We didn't even get into the fact that he's our learning chair this year and has been putting on some great events. So with that said, Rachid is definitely an entrepreneur you should know, and I'm glad you were able to listen in on the show today. Continue to follow us on, as Rachid said, on our Facebook and YouTube channels, where we'll have weekly podcast shows regarding entrepreneurs you should know. Thank you, and have a great rest of the day.